Good morning, everybody. I'm Alex Randall Kittredge here. I write the ARC Strategy newsletter here on Substack, helping office workers and knowledge workers build a durable career in the post AI economy. I'm here with John Bruton from Operating by John Bruton.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm John. It's nice to see you. I'm sending a link out, uh, and I are live right now.
And
So come on over.
we're here to
Uh,
talk to you this morning. This is part of a series that John and I have been doing on the death of the corporate career. And today our loose title is Why the Fractional Executive is the New Safety Net for Corporate Refugees. And I
mhm,
think just to open the framing for folks a little bit,
mhm,
I always like to talk about my grandfather who had a career. He worked for one company for 30 years. He retired with a gold watch and a pension. And I think even saying that out loud nowadays is pretty preposterous. It's almost incredulous. No one would believe you if especially if you told someone who is Gen Z that used to be the case. They'd be like, "What are you
mhm,
talking about?" And these days with what companies call managed attrition, not filling roles after someone leaves, or
mhm.
the mass layoffs that we've seen over the last few years,
Yeah.
I think it's only accelerated with AI, the financialization in corporations and the aversion to adding headcount. You know, we've done a live stream previously on employment treated as a variable cost, and why that's led to the contractorization of the workforce. I think for John, you're an operator. You run a Substack about operating, and
Mhm.
you've been a fractional executive for quite some time now. What did that look like at the beginning when you were just starting out?
Um, well, yeah, I think I think fractional is very interesting. I think I think there's a path. So I think you, let's say you're working for a company, and then if you're the CEO of the company, you're CFO of the company, COO, and then that company gets sold, and the new buyer, say, I don't want to work for that buyer. Or the buyer says, hey, I already got someone to do this over here. We don't need you. Um, I think the logical thought, Alex, is to then say, okay, great. Well, let's go. I'll become a consultant. Um, but I think there's something valuable in choosing to go fractional, and I look at the fractional versus consulting thing as two different pieces. Where I think there are a lot of, especially small businesses and family businesses,
Hmm.
where they need they don't need to pay for a full-time CPA to be their CFO. They
Right.
don't need to pay for someone who understands ISO 9001 continuous improvement systems and business process mapping notation to be their COO and build out all their process maps for them. Um, but they do need help, and they need someone who's willing to step in and actually do some of that work and engage. So when I think fractional, I think, okay, I'm going to go and embed for these hours each week in this business. Yes, I'm going to help learn things, consult on things, but mostly I'm going to be doing work in the normal workflows, or work that immediately impacts the workflow of the firm I'm working with. And I think that if you start there, first of all, I think that's an easier sell to a lot of
Mm.
business owners. If something, then hey, let me consult to you. Well, what do you think about this? What have you done? How do I know you? Like, where's your credibility? Like, those are higher hurdles. They're not
Right.
Those are hurdles that can be jumped, but they are harder to jump. Whereas if you say, look, hire me as a fractional COO, CFO, I'm going to come in, I'm going to go in your warehouse, and I'm going to build out a set of inventory management and uh, uh, counting. Oh God, what's the term? Uh, oh God, I'm blanking on it right now. Anyway, I'm going to build a set of inventory management processes out for you,
Mm.
for cycle counting, and I'm gonna put a cycle counting process in place in your warehouse. Okay, great, John. I'd love for you to come in and do that, and that's practical, and that immediately helps the business. And I would say that's fractional. Um, and then I'll fractionally, when I'm done with that, and that's looking good, then cool, I can come in another 5 hours and we can do this. And I think as you do more of that type of work, I think you realize where you are most valuable as a consultant or an advisor. And I think there's kind of this like this hierarchy there. And so anyway, I don't know if that's answering the question and maybe a little bit more, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think you touched on like the difference between what a fractional executive is or a fractional consultant versus a freelance consultant. And
Yeah.
I think to better define it for our listeners or folks here on the recording,
Hmm.
freelancing potentially is more task based. Like
Yeah.
you're working on a specific task, whereas fractional, to your point earlier, is more outcome based. You're gonna create a certain outcome for
Yes.
the company. And,
Exactly.
if you're freelancing, you're more replaceable. You're more of a commodity. Whereas in a fractional environment, your talent is scarce and you
Yeah.
are, you're not easily replaceable. I think freelancing as well is often volume driven. You're interchangeable. It's almost like the idea of commoditized
Hmm.
labor. Whereas
Absolutely.
the fractional executive has higher leverage. They have that area of expertise
Yeah.
and they're selling their judgment as opposed to selling their time. While they might bill in a time bound increment, I
Yeah.
think it's less the number of hours worked, but again, selling that outcome that the company is looking for. Would you agree with that?
I do. And I was struck in listening to you and thinking, there's this distinction between the worlds within which we both kind of deploy our skills, where you're in New York. And so in I think what in knowing you and your work history and talking a lot about all this, like I think a lot of your perspective lends itself to uh larger corporates, and then
Mm.
also to very well funded startups that have real runway to work with. Whereas a lot of my perspective and experience is very small business companies doing 10, 15, 20 million in sales, 25 want to get to 55 million, wants to get to 12 million in revenue terms. And family business. And so I think that's really interesting to see the breakdown and the greater granularity you have in thinking about it relative to uh kind of these larger environments and things too, which I think is really interesting to me because I don't really have that experience.
Well, I think too, and I've observed this from a fractional, there are all these fractional consulting organizations that have popped
Sure.
up. And I think a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of them,
Uh,
a lot of them started in the CFO space. So for a
sure.
startup or for a smaller company, you wanted to have a CFO, but you
Mhm.
definitely couldn't afford them full time. So you would
Yeah.
hire them on a fractional basis.
Yes.
It's interesting. Over the last maybe 2 to 5 years, you've seen a lot more of these fractional CFO practices expand and add a CMO or
Yep.
someone who can do human resources or,
Yes.
a fractional COO.
Yes.
And, it's almost like it started with finance and, the finance because that's such a big part of the balance sheet. You can't hire a full-time CFO. That would be very expensive for these smaller organizations. And it's branched out into this menu of other functional areas.
Yeah, and I would also say too, I think small business, startup too. Um, I I think a CFO would get like a high quality CFO would be so bored in a smaller organization 'cause there's just not enough work
Mm.
to do. I think that's also part of it. It's like it's like I did some fractional work years ago on some operational things and have consulted operationally on a lot of companies. And what I typically find is like um it's like solving the same problems over and over again. And it is uh that it wouldn't even be worth it for a company of a certain size to hire this. I hope this doesn't sound like egotistical, but like to hire someone with my set of experiences full time into the organization because it would be boring work on my end, but it would also like it just wouldn't make good use of their money because they wouldn't take full use of like the total scope of maybe what I could do. And I think that's also part of it is yet there are moments in a month, in a quarter, in a year where that small business does need very high grade CFO advice on on cash flow management strategy, on supplier management strategy, on how to negotiate better payment terms with their clients and their suppliers, on where when and like that, the greater level of experience might really help them. And Yeah, so I think the other thing I think is that this shift is moving way down the value chain within
Mm.
organizations. I think it's moving into it's moved into HR, it's moving into marketing. I think it's going to move into I think you're going to see more financial roles. I think you're going to see receivables, payables, uh, inventory management, like all kinds of different roles. I think will become fractional. Um, over time moving forward.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head because I have that. I am a chief of staff or COO,
Yep.
depending on the size of the organization. And I've had a
Same.
number of clients that were smaller companies, maybe seed stage or pre seed.
Yep.
And, I did a lot of really targeted, great work for them. And
Yeah.
they needed that level of expertise from time to time. But at the end of the engagement, a few of them wanted me to come on board full time. And I had
Yep.
to tell them, I don't think there's enough work for me to do here. I don't think there's enough of a job yet. Maybe when you get to
Yep.
series A or B or C, we can have that conversation again. But right now, there's not enough work for me to do anything other than a fractional engagement. There aren't, if we still define work as 40 hours a week, maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
There aren't 40 hours for me to do because it's too small of an organization. And I think that's
Mhm.
where these smaller organizations can benefit from the skills and expertise of these larger scale operators on
Mhm.
a micro level.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that, and I also think increasingly there's a lot of conversation about generalists, and I think that kind of goes in a couple different directions. But one of the things is, I think if you want full time work within a startup or a smaller to mid sized company, I think accepting that is going to mean you're going to have to become a multi specialist. Not just a generalist in different areas. I think you're going to have to become specialized in multiple areas. Maybe we call that a generalist, but I think it's actually no, basically you're going to have to do more, and you're going to have to develop multiple expertise, and you're going to have to work a lot of hours. Uh, I think that's a natural conclusion here. People that are surviving in large corporates right now and in single companies and in the world, people were working a lot of hours, and there's it's and so I think I think that's part of it as well. Is the and maybe that's a choice that you can make. If you're building here on Substack, you're building on LinkedIn, you're building in other places online, you're trying to get the word out about your consulting business or your fractional COO business or your whatever it is. um if you're deciding whether or not to make that jump, it's like, okay, do you want to stay hyper specialized in your space and
Hmm.
know everything about that space and really build a great offering around that? Or if you want to work for a company, a single company full time, I think you got to start thinking about, okay, tangentially, what are other skills I need to develop so that I can wear multiple hats?
Well, I think too, the fractional work, it allows the executive or the worker to have more sovereignty through the scarcity of their skill set. I think
Hmm.
the executive or the fractional operator, they become the allocator of their own expertise. So
Right.
you're able to divide it up. And to your point, you're not beholden to one single
Yeah.
employer or one single
Right.
corporation. In a
Right.
way, if you are more hyper specialized, it's definitely beneficial to you because you're much more targeted in your offering. I think you raise a good point on the generalist, and I know we've had this
Hmm.
conversation
Hmm.
before.
Yeah.
Is the generalist the way of the future, or is the generalist the way of the past? I think there was an interesting piece I read by Ruben Dominguez on
Mhm.
how the nonlinear career is the path of the future,
Sure.
especially with AI. The AI
Mhm.
fills in the gaps of that technical specificity that maybe you don't have because you're more of a T-shaped leader as opposed
Mhm.
to an M-shaped leader.
Absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think it's also, I guess that my only concern. I wrote an article about this a little while ago. Uh, I think it was called the the Generalist Problem, I think was the name of it. Um, and and I have an image of Michael Scott from The Office, which was best boss in the world. This was my most my report. Anyway, that was funny. But but anyway, I think there's this thing within general. The thing that worries me is that there's this thought, oh, generalist. I think there have been generalists a long time, people who have adapted and moved across different spheres of specialization, who have worn multiple hats. I mean, my whole career is in small and family business, so it's like the essential thing you hire for in a business like that is willing to wear multiple hats. Hey,
Mm.
this shipment didn't get to the customer. I need you to put this in your car, or I need to get in my car and drive to Columbus, Ohio from Pittsburgh today to drop this off to our guy who's driving up from, Cincinnati or whatever to I need you to do that. Oh shoot, we're down two guys in the warehouse today. Can someone put on their winter coat and go out there and do some picking and packing and and get the stuff out? And so um I think the generalist concept is familiar to the small and family business space. Um but I think in the current context, I really think it means like multi-specialization.
Mhm.
I think from a company's perspective, it means uh we want you to be able to do more. If you are a marketer, we also want you to be expert at sales. And maybe we want you to be able to run our sales and our marketing teams and
Mm.
orchestrate the agents that function across all of those locations. If you're working in information systems, that's great. We want you to oversee our entire inventory management system as well, orchestrate the agents there, and be able to give managerial direction to the various people that are working in both locations. Um, I think you're gonna see a lot more of that. And yeah, I think, and then there's also like at what point, like, are we going to see more polymaths? Is like polymathing going to become something that we talk a lot more about, which I think is kind of a different thing than generalism, but I wonder. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think to relate to that, the polymath idea, there's definitely a psychological shift that needs to happen.
hmm
It's the transition. I think it's even harder than a structural transition. It's a cognitive
hmm
transition for you. You have to stop asking for permission to be multi-passionate or to have more than one area of interest, more than one identity. I think in the corporate world, you're so pigeonholed into one identity of the thing
hmm
you do. And as a fractional executive our other favorite term we use, content creator, you, you have this, you're this sovereign operator and you have
hmm
to define what your areas of competency are for yourself.
no,
I think it also comes down to, and I talk about the portfolio career, but if you view
hmm
your career as a portfolio, you're allocating your capacity between different clients and different projects, different work streams,
hmm
and you move from this mindset of climbing a ladder or climbing a corporate ladder to having these assets that compound upon each other over time.
sure.
And I think I was talking with another entrepreneur this week, and we were doing a live stream. We were talking about the power of pricing. And,
hmm
one of the mistakes that fractional folks or fractional executives make sometimes, I think, is
hmm
pricing themselves too low and trying to go after too many clients. I think there's
hmm
real
Okay.
power in having a higher price, but attracting the right type of clients. I would love your thoughts on this, John. I know you have a lot more experience than I do, but it's a it can be, I think, a recipe for burnout if you're selling yourself too short.
Um, yes. So my thoughts on pricing. Um, I, I think I'm a little contrarian on this, but like
Mm,
I think when you're starting and you're trying to figure it out, I think you should price way low and massively over deliver and build a reputation as someone who over delivers for people. I think you can also I think you then get more reps, like more at bats doing the thing. And I think as you do the thing more, like the operating founders thing I'm doing right now, I think I can provide a lot of value to people on the content side and on the business building side and on the thinking about how it all comes together in the form of like a micro business. But I also know that I can hugely over deliver on the amount of money that was charged for that and the time that I'm giving to it. And so, and really, I haven't done a lot of coaching in my life. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I'd like to, could coaching really become part of my like another revenue vertical for my business? And so I'm getting a bunch of reps in right now, learning that and
Mm,
seeing where do people find value. So I think when you start, I think you should assume that you are overvaluing yourself, that you are less valuable than you think you are, um, and that you should price at a point where uh, where people will take you seriously enough, but where you will be able to get a lot of reps and then build a reputation of over delivering. Um, I personally think burnout's just a choice we make. I don't think it's something that happens to us. I think we impose it on ourselves. And I think if you think you're going to be successful and you're never going to burn out, you're just like you're kidding yourself. Like I've been burnt out so many times in my life, and you know what? I've really succeeded in my life too. And I will burn
mm.
out more times in my life, and I'm not afraid of it, and I know how to move past it, and I grow and I become stronger when I figure out what isn't working and I figure out how to balance. Um, uh, but I think I don't try to actively avoid it, but I do try to work uh to to have it not be like hugely detrimental or to get better at managing it over time or to or to make it more sustainable over time. So that's me.
Yeah, well, I think you touched on something, and I think there's two definitions of burnout. One is like
Hmm.
just being incredibly busy, but two,
Hmm.
what I talk to a lot is the burnout that comes from doing something that's not aligned with your values. So, in a corporate environment, if you're working for something that doesn't align with your values, or
Hmm.
there's this cognitive dissonance, that mismatch between what you're doing and what you actually believe internally. I think that can lead to the more detrimental type of burnout, as opposed to what you're saying, where there's the burnout of just I'm too busy, I'm doing too many things. I think one is a cognitive dissonance, and the other is just pure exhaustion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I don't think I've. That's not true. Um, there's a lot about my work where I've thought about like relationships and humanity and how I want to treat people and how I want to be treated and values that all pertain to that's very, very critical to me. And really important to me. So that's an interesting point, Alex. Um, yeah, I think I mean, I think it's different for everybody. I think everyone experiences things differently. And I think it's just important to like know yourself and understand like what works for you, what doesn't work for you, because then that's how you succeed in building a sustainable system of work and learning and that makes sense. Um, I just I don't know. Anything I think I've ever built successfully in my life has required just an exhaustive amount of work
Yeah.
and has just required uh probably not thinking too much about values. Like I don't like I mean I know what my values are and I know how I want to treat people. I know how I want to be treated. I think that's very important. Um but I think there's also this very competitive side of things, where the reality is you're most likely going to lose, and so you need to work very hard to be learning and trying to get better to ultimately succeed in what it is you're trying to build. And anytime I've done that in the minor ways I don't have like Wall Street Journal headline worthy successes to talk about by any means, but I have some things that I'm proud of, and every time I've done that, it's just like tunnel vision work
Mm.
and work and work and work until and learn and learn and learn. And like improve until like, I kind of get there. And I haven't found that in those moments and periods of time in my life, I haven't found I have a lot of time to think about much about how I feel. It's just
Hmm.
about the work and learning to get better and learning what the customer needs and how to solve for the problems of the customer. And that is not sustainable. that reaches a max, that reaches a point where it's like, and then it's like, okay, you need a break. But that's me.
But I think too, and I don't want to belabor the point because I do want to move on to like the
Yeah.
economic case for why folks need to do this. But I do think that you might be lucky in that you've never had to work a soul crushing job.
Oh, I
And
absolutely have. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I years. I had a period of time in my work life where I was not in the same place for more than 3 days for
Hmm,
4 years. 4 years.
hmm,
I didn't take a single vacation day. No vacation for 4
wow,
years. I flew for my Christmas holidays on Christmas Day all of those years.
wow,
I mean, I had no relationships. I could not sustain a dating relationship. I had friends. Nobody. The only people that knew me were the people who were working with me.
wow.
And it was really hard. And it was absolutely, yeah, it was very unhealthy. I mean, it was not,
Yeah.
that was not sustainable or healthy. But ultimately it created the biggest success of my career. And so I would go back and do it exactly the same way to get to where ultimately we got. But do I want to live that way now? Do I want to do that again? Probably not.
Well, I think that's a good segue because it
Yeah.
touches on the economic case. And part of what I always talk about is, having that one source of full-time employment
Yeah.
is an incredible concentration risk. And
Yeah.
to what you were saying, you know, relying on, for one thing on all versions of success or identity or personal relationships,
Absolutely.
that's really dangerous, especially
Yeah.
in the world of work that we have nowadays. I think,
Yeah.
you know, the fractional executive and the whole point of this live stream is to talk about how the fractional executive is more anti-fragile. They have a lot of they have a
Mhm.
lot of pieces of work in different places, and their identity is not
Mhm.
so tied up in one definition of work or success.
Yeah.
And
It's diversified.
and I think that scarcity too, to the point we made earlier, the scarcity between the firms, it almost works to your benefit because it increases your pricing power. If you're so in demand, I mean, I'm not the economist, but supply and demand. If
Mhm.
if there's folks that are, if
Yeah.
everyone's demanding your time, there's only one lever you have. It's to increase your price.
Absolutely. Yes. That. I would say too, what I was saying earlier about like start low. Start low to
Mm.
get reps to see your value, to understand it. And then once you really clearly understand the value and there's a lot of demand for the service, but I think it's easier to get to that place where you have the thing that where there creates a lot of demand once you've really spent the time to understand what it is, rather than just like from day one. Like, for instance, I would rather have 50 clients paying me $100 an hour in my first year of working than I would one client paying me 5,000, because I'm gonna be so much better at the end of that year in knowing how I add value in what I do. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
does. And I think that goes into the last part of our discussion today is just the
Yeah.
risks and hard truths that are important for credibility. You can't
Yeah.
romanticize the idea of being a fractional worker or a fractional
Yeah.
executive. The fractional work, it requires really good brand clarity. Like, what is the
Mhm.
value that you bring? What is the service that you offer?
Yep.
That ties into how you're able to sell yourself or
Mhm.
sell your capabilities. You have to understand the value you bring in order to sell it properly.
Yeah.
And we've danced around it up until now, but it requires an incredible amount of emotional resilience. And
Yes.
it really, the shift from employee to entrepreneur is a tough one to make, and
Yeah.
it's not necessarily for everyone. But I would argue, and I have argued that everyone does need to make this shift because that's the way the world is trending.
Yeah. Yes.
Unfortunately. And, we haven't touched on the piece about financial runway, but certainly,
Mhm.
it's a very privileged position to be able to do this test and learn, this experimentation. It helps to have a bit of a financial cushion, whether you've saved up previously.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's not everyone is built for it, but increasingly, the institutions that we have nowadays, they're not built for everyone either. And,
Mm.
with the increasing layoffs and the lack of employment opportunities, I think the smart professionals are moving toward this more entrepreneurial, fractional working way of working.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I would also say that, like, I think, um, so I grew up in an entrepreneurial household.
Hmm.
My folks had a business, and I did a lot of work with them in that business. And so I think now, like, this work and, like, and what I've been doing with my consulting business for a number of years and whatnot, I think it's like all I've ever known in a sense. And
Yeah.
so I think it's, uh, and like, and I think some of my mindset around some of these things is based on the kind of the risks and liabilities and carrying that with you all the time. It's an extremely stressful situation. It's extremely stressful to manage it at points. And uh, I think, yeah, I just think I think that what is so critical is that people who are trying to make that jump, have a lot of grace for yourself, take care of yourself, get as much sleep as you can, try to work out and have a good approach to your holistic health. And then expect to work an enormous number of hours.
Mm.
Expect don't like anything that's like, oh, and then I have a life of freedom and I can travel and work from anywhere in the world and I can do all that. Yes, you can get there, but that takes time. That takes a lot of the folks who then kind of sell that dream,
Yeah.
like if you actually look at the timeline it took them to get there, it's like after the corporate, it then took 4, 5, 6 years of
Yeah.
really hard work to get there, and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety to deal with along the way. So I think, yes, have a lot of grace for yourself, get into a learning mode, ask all the questions you can, meet as many people as you can who are doing it, learn as much as you can, um, and just get ready to have to do a lot of work and early morning, night, weekends, all of it. Uh, uh, because I think that's just what's required if you're gonna make something out of nothing. Um, and then yeah, have a goal to get to a place down the road where there's a lot more freedom. But I think there's just some expectations that are important to set.
Well, that's great advice, John. I think on that, we're about at time, but
Yeah,
as for folks that are joining us or have joined us,
yeah,
I'm Alex Randall Kittredge. I write the ARC Strategy newsletter here on Substack,
it
helping
does.
office workers, knowledge workers build durable careers in the post AI economy that transcend the corporate ladder. I've been joined by John Bruton, operating by John Bruton,
Uh, yes, operating by John Bruton. Come check me out. It'd be great.
and we do this every week or so. So we'll be back next week or
Yeah,
the week after,
yeah,
and looking forward to helping folks define what the path forward looks like.
it's awesome. Alex, it's always great to see you. Have an amazing weekend in your wonderful city, and thanks so much for stopping by, everyone. Have a really great weekend. Thank you.